InObscuria.
Welcome back, my friends, to the InObscuria podcast, a podcast where we exhume obscure rock and punk and metal, and we put them in one of three categories: the lost, the forgotten, or the should-have-beens. I am one of your co-hosts, Kevin Williams, and I'm joined always by Mr.
It's been a long day. Oh, yeah, Robert Harrison.
What's going on, Robert?
I should have had another cup of coffee.
Oh, speaking of, I have mine here. We have not been drinking beer lately.
No, we need to coffee's not working. Let's switch back to beer. I had enough this weekend, though. I need to dry out for a couple of days.
So I am a rock and roll enthusiast. I have lots and lots of albums and releases, and what I like to do is pull from my collection, and I try to pull something that's obscure, something that I think didn't get its due. It's either lost or forgotten, or it should have been huge in my view. And I like to spring that on Robert and get his reaction, whether he knows it or not. And then Robert is a musician. He's an artist. He works with fire. He does all sorts of crazy projects. And then this weekend you had some major festivities at your firehouse that you live at. So tell us.
It was a busy weekend. We had a private event here Friday night. It was a company Christmas party. I don't even remember what company it was, but we had a good time.
People hire you live here.
I live here.
People pay to have their parties and events.
Yeah, if I leave the doors open and come home, there's a party, and so people just feel free to come and use it. But yeah, it was a good catered event, and I got leftovers, and that's always a bonus when you get paid for that and you get leftovers. So a well-stocked fridge is a happy fridge, in my opinion. And then Saturday we had an artist market for the holidays, and we had about 500 people come through the firehouse over several hours, and it was just a madhouse.
So you had 500 out of the 4,000 that said they were coming.
Yeah, which is usual. About 10% will actually show up for the people that aren't interested on social media these days. That's about average.
That's interesting.
And then we had a concert last night. It was a flamenco concert. If you've never seen one of these, we have a friend of mine that's 6 feet tall, and she performs flamenco dances with some live musicians. The guitar players are amazing. These guys just completely rocked it. And then we had two chefs cooking paella in these giant 3-foot wide dishes, and so my patio smells like paella. It's really good.
Now, was it obscure flamenco?
Yeah, I didn't recognize any of it, so it could have been on this podcast.
So,
that's another show for another day. We'll mark that down. But it's an amazing, a very emotional performance. I never thought I would talk that way about somebody dancing in my living room, but it's quite the show. And with
I would think
food.
that you would talk about an emotional dance in your living room, but
well, no, I don't talk about that stuff. It just happens.
Got it. Interesting, man. That's always cool to hear what's going on at the firehouse, the old Smyrna firehouse. You can actually go and check it out on social. Very cool. Take a look at the pics and see what Robert's done to restore this place. So as always, I like to mention some of the podcasts that got me into this and things that I think folks should check out. The Dummy Room, Pod of Thunder, Decibel Geek, Podcast Rock City, Cobras and Fire, Grown Up Rock, Rock Strikes 10, History Science Theater, and the I Love It Loudcast. That's a new one for me. Peter Cesare and his co-host. I'm starting to get into that one, so that one's pretty cool. Check it out. And then always come visit us at InObscuria.com. Like us, share us, do all that kind of social stuff. We're everywhere. And I've been trying to post more pictures of the groups. If we have an episode where we feature several groups that may be obscure, I've been trying to find some pictures and post those before the episode goes up to see if anybody can guess them. And so far, no one has guessed any of the groups except for when we had the Black Friday. The guys from Pod of Thunder knew who Radke was. So that's the only one that anyone's guessed.
You get them points. I love the pictures, though. That's a lot of entertainment in just one photo right there. A lot of these things you've posted.
The one that, when we did the acid rock and I put the picture up of the cane.
Yeah.
That was a great
And Billy
picture.
Joel.
And Billy Joel, yeah. Awesome. All right, so, every week I like to reach out to the spirits, to do some sort of conjuring of the ghosts to find out what we're going to talk about. We do need some spooky music to go in here, behind here. That would be editing, and that would be, extra work. I'm just not going to do that.
We're good.
So anyway, this week, I thought, where can I go to get the theme for this week? And so this morning when I got up, I felt like it was a really good time to go get a reading, do a tarot card reading, as one does in most mornings, on a Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, there's one down the street from your house.
Monday.
You just pass by on your way to work, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so I just passed by and went in and got a tarot card reading. So it was an old lady, as it usually is, with some sort of bandana on.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah.
It was either an old woman with a bandana or it was Axl Rose. I'm not sure who it was, but
it's hard to tell.
It was kind of reddish, so it might have been Axl. So anyway, I sat down with Axl and got my tarot reading, and she, it was hard to tell.
They
basically said, the first thing they said was, you need to change today.
Change
anything
today. Specific?
I thought they were asking for change.
I'm
going to pay you dollars. I don't really bring change with me, but anyway. And then they laid out the cards, and they said, write down these letters, and it was LOST, but the letters were backwards. And I'm like, well, I don't get it. Why is it?
It still kind of spells lost, though, even backwards.
It spelled lost, but I could tell it was lost. But the letters were backwards. And
mirror image.
So then I went and held it up to the mirror, and I totally got it. So today,
I just now noticed. I've been staring at the shirt.
You just noticed I'm wearing
the whole
a shirt.
time. I'm staring at that, and I just now figured that out.
What does my shirt read, Robert?
The Sounds of Liberty. I don't have my glasses, and I can read that.
Sounds of Liberty.
Okay, I don't have my glasses. You're across the room over there.
So backwards. So it's TSOL. So today we're going to talk about the band TSOL, which is short for True Sounds of Liberty. And we are actually, this is going to be, because there's two very distinct TSOL bands. And this is going to be TSOL, The Resurrection of Joe Wood.
Ooh.
Resurrecting Wood. We'll get into it.
Okay.
We'll get into it.
All right.
So just hold on. So TSOL, for those who know, most of folks think of TSOL as one of the early Southern California hardcore punk bands, and that's what they were. However, they evolved their sound every time they had a release, so it was hard to pin them down on exactly what they were. But they were a punk rock band formed in 1978 from Long Beach, California, and they were really a bunch of misfit surfers. They're known for their shows always had violence, and it was just that early 80s, late 70s, early 80s punk rock scene that everybody was scared of. They're part of the reason that everybody was scared of it. Okay? Because they were these kind of tough surfer guys who would, go steal your car, and, they were just not... They were those kinds of guys. So
good, wholesome Americans.
Yeah. So the original lineup, who are actually still around today, they're still performing today. And I believe, did you go to TSOL with me?
It sounds familiar. That's why I'm embarrassed that I didn't know the first word there.
A couple years ago, we went on a kind of a whim on a school night.
Was it Masquerade?
I think it was Masquerade.
Yeah.
And we saw TSOL. We saw the original band, which is Jack Grissom on vocals, Ron Emery on guitar, Mike Roche on bass. And the original drummer was Todd Barnes. He passed away in the 90s, but that was the original band, and they released their first EP in the early 80s, I believe 81. And most people know this, it's an iconic cover. It's just a black cover. It says TSOL across it, and it's them on stage, but it's like a, what do you call it? It's black and white, but it's a negative. That's where I was trying to go with that. Very iconic cover, and they kind of helped establish what became known as the SoCal hardcore scene. So you had your early punk in New York with the Ramones and that whole vibe, and then you had your late 70s, very early 80s California scene with the Germs and those types of bands, and then you had your hardcore, what became known as hardcore, which started with TSOL, Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Vandals, Bad Religion, Social Distortion, that sort of thing. So all those bands were from a very close range, and all those bands still have a lot of pull today on helping to establish what punk rock is known as today. So they kind of had this real hardcore sound, and then as they evolved, like I said, every time they released an album or an EP, they evolved their sound, and they released an album called Dance With Me, which probably has the most well-known TSOL songs on it, and they were kind of labeled death punk. So they're like got real gothy because I think they got into the Damned and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. The Damned were very gothy and became a goth band, and T.S.O.L started going down that same trajectory. So most of the songs were about death and, very punk rock.
It's a good holiday album. I put it on during Christmas.
And then they went over to the Dead Kennedys label, Alternative Tentacles, and they put out another EP again where they were kind of morphing into a different sound. And then they totally switched gears in, I believe it was, 82, 83. And they added keyboards, which back then for a band that was considered hardcore to add keyboards to their
heresy.
Sound, yeah, it was crazy. And they basically changed into what became like a goth sound. It was punk rock, but it was very goth, and it had some pop sensibility. Again, totally polarizing from where they started, but they still kept their punk rock cred. Mm-hmm. I think they probably lost some fans, but they still had their cred. I mean, they were like in between the Damned and Susie and the Banshees, which was very different from where they started. And they actually, because of that, because they were getting so much notoriety, they were featured in Penelope Sphere's film called Suburbia. Have you ever seen Suburbia?
No.
You should check it out. It's so. Do you know who Penelope Sphere is? Are you familiar with her? She did. She's done a lot of films, but most notably, for me at least, she did Decline of the Western Civilization, parts 1, 2, and 3. Part 1 was featured mostly punk rock. It was all about the punk rock scene.
Yeah.
Part 2 was the metal years.
I've heard about that. Yeah, I just didn't recognize the name.
Yeah, part 2 was the metal years, and then part 3 was it was another punk, but in the 90s. So basically she covered early 80s, kind of mid to late 80s, and then early 90s with these 3 films. Excellent films. Go check them out. But Suburbia is a fictional movie. It's not a documentary, but it's about the punk rock kids in the early 80s living kind of in a house, like they're all degenerates, and they've all been kicked out of their homes, and they all live together, and they just do wild and crazy what kids would do if they lived by themselves. And it's very well done. It's a fun watch. It features, I believe, D.I. and the Vandals and T.S.O.L, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong there, but I know T.S.O.L's in it. And also it features a very young Flea. He's one of the actors in it. He plays a big part in the movie.
Him in a sock.
Looks just like Flea. Yeah, he's not wearing a sock in this one. But anyway, they get featured in that film, so they get more national notoriety, I guess you could say. But because of the direction that they were going, and because they had changed so much, I guess the guys in the band just decided that 2 of them were going to go one direction and 2 of them were going to go another direction. So I think Ron and Mike, who were the guitarist and the bass player, they wanted to stay true to punk. And then Jack Grissom and the drummer, they wanted to do more of where they were going with this whole exploration of keyboards and kind of alternative sounding music. So they split. So basically TSOL supposedly was done. But then kind of where our story begins today is Jack is the singer, Jack Grissom. His brother-in-law happened to be a punk rock musician as well. And he was a guy named Joe Wood. And Joe was like a late 70s guitarist, singer in a punk band in L.A. that I think they were called Der Stab or something like that. They didn't get they didn't get famous, but, they played the scene. And then he had gone at like 22 and decided, I'm going to be a blues musician. I'm not going to do punk anymore, because he kind of came from that background of blues. So so the difference is he's a guitar player. Jack Grissom was just a singer. Joe's a guitar player. He plays the blues. He knows how to play really well. And he has a really cool crooning kind of Jim Morrison sounding voice. So very different from what Jack Grissom was, who has more of a nasally tone. So anyway, Ron and Mike, the guitarist and the bass player, they're hanging out with Joe. And they go and play with his band every once in a while, his blues band. And they decide, let's just start writing some songs and playing around. Well, I guess their management gets word of it, and they said, just call it TSOL and just continue on. And so that's what they do. So they basically take what really shouldn't have been TSOL and become TSOL again. But Jack and and the drummer not involved in this. So it's a completely different band. You just have the same guitarist and the same bass
It
player.
was just convenient because they had the name recognition.
They had some notoriety, and TSOL had released their albums on different labels, I think, with every release. So it wasn't like they had a major deal or anything.
Right.
But these guys are able to start writing, and they put together, I guess, a pretty good packet, and Enigma signs them, which is a decent, smaller label, signs them. And they borrow money from the Dead Kennedys to record their first album. The Dead Kennedys also loan them the tour bus, so they go out and tour and while they're writing these songs, and then they come back and they record it. But where I come into this is my TSOL. So when I was first getting into music, I mentioned this several times, but I was a little skate punk, and skate punks loved punk rock in the mid '80s. And so one of the first cassette tapes that I ever had, I remember my first 3 cassette tapes. My first one was Tears for Fears, because that was big.
It's okay.
I love that album to this day, Songs from the Big Chair. But then I got Metallica, Master of Puppets, right when it came out in '86. And the next tape I got was a mail away from Thrasher magazine, put out by Thrasher magazine, called Skate Rock Volume 2, Blazing Wheels and Barking Trucks.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yes.
Blazing Wheels and Barking Trucks.
Blazing Wheels and Barking Trucks. You know what trucks are on skateboards,
Yes,
right? Okay.
yes. Yeah, not the diesel trucks. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, just making sure we're on the level.
I got a little bit of coolness, not as much as I used to have.
Oh, I was never cool.
Yeah,
I
got a tiny
hurt.
bit. I do remember that. I learned early on I had no business on a skateboard. I stuck to BMX racing. That was it.
The only thing I did on a skateboard was bleed.
I would have done a lot of that.
A lot of bleeding. But anyway, so on this tape, there were actually 2 TSOL songs. And this tape, to this day, I actually pulled it out today and went, man, I still have it. And it's so weathered, and it looks like it's just going to fall apart. But it featured 2 TSOL songs. One of the songs is off the first album they did with Joe. However, that particular song is sung by Ron Emery, the guitarist. So it sounds nothing like TSOL because it's got him singing it. And he only sang like two or 3 songs in their whole discography. I don't know why they picked that one for the skate rock tape. And then the other song was a song called Otherside. And it was, I think, an outtake that didn't make it onto the first album with Joe Wood. And so I knew TSOL from this outtake song. And that's the voice of Joe Wood. That's what you associate. That's what I think of as TSOL. So I thought it made sense to kick this whole thing off with a little song from Skate Rock Volume 2. This is Otherside, TSOL. Check it out.
I think I'm going insane. I am so tired of this battle and shame. When I'm in the brush now, and I can see all the flames in your sweet city. You know I am stuck in Vietnam. You know who I am, stuck in Vietnam, yeah. Well, I can see you through my scope. You know it's hard for me to try to cope. I can see you through my eyes. I'm not leaving till everybody dies. Everybody dies, yeah. You know I am. I'm stuck in Vietnam. No. You know who I am. I'm stuck in Vietnam.
I'm glad you mentioned the Jim Morrison correlation before, because I could definitely hear that throughout the song. I could picture the Doors maybe in their early years. This is not true, but picturing their early years before they got really into psychedelics and just with their angry youth and letting it out. That's what it reminded me of, the hint of Southern California.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, total Jim Morrison. And I heard TSOL, if I'm putting it into perspective of when I heard the various songs from both TSOL and the Doors, I would say I probably heard TSOL first before you heard the Doors.
So you thought Jim Morrison sounded like this guy.
Well, I just knew it was a baritone voice, and I knew I loved that sound. And the other thing that I think is cool is I'm listening to the lyrics from this song, because I had forgotten what the lyrics were about, but it's about Vietnam. It's about somebody going to the other side in Vietnam, which is so mid-'80s. I mean, there was a big fascination in the media.
4 or 5 movies about the same time, Platoon.
Yeah, maybe like a couple years from, after this was, but it was, I just remember being that age and finding out about Vietnam and the horrors of it. And
people were just starting to talk about it at that point. It's 10 years after the fact.
Exactly.
And it was getting to the point where people were starting to
And that's what it used to take before people could really talk about the war or whatever war it was. It took some time before you could actually start talking about it. And that was the time in the 80s where Vietnam was a big, heavy subject, where people were exploring all the, what happened to the folks who came back.
I remember there was a TV series. It wasn't long-lived. Yeah, I remember watching that on TV, and that's how popular it was. Is with the TV networks were copying it, then it's definitely popular at the time.
Tell you what, we'll hold this for another episode. But if we ever get Brandon Still on here, let's talk about Tour of Duty with Brandon.
Was that his gig?
Well, just hold, because there's a great story.
Okay.
There's a very famous war that he and I participated in. We'll just have to save it for another episode, but it's going to be classic.
I've heard parts of this before, but that's a good story. It's worth tuning in for.
Yeah, so we'll table that for another time. But I just thought it was so of the time to be talking about that. So you can hear this is a band that with Joe, they've kind of gone and they've taken punk, yet they've added kind of more of a classic rock sound, but also they've added like this whole gothy. You can tell they're moving into a darker kind of place, which is just hit me in the right spot, because that's the type of music I like. I like the kind of darker stuff, and that's the path they were going down. Like I said, TSOL with every single release up until this point has changed what they're doing, and here they are again with a new singer and an extra guitar, and they're changing again. They're what kind of music they're playing.
I've heard that with a lot of punk rock bands that start off really raw, really edgy. It's just pure raw emotion when they're playing, and then the next album, there's this metamorphosis with a lot of them where they introduce a little bit of melody, a little bit more focus on the actual music itself. I mean, you and I had a similar experience. We first started, when I picked up the electric guitar, it was just as loud and fast as possible. And then after I got that on my system, I did want to focus a little bit more on the music and the melody. And that tends to be where my sweet spot is with punk rock, is that maybe the second generation, the second album with a lot of bands.
Yeah, and I think that was happening with a lot of these bands, in particular from California, who started off in hardcore. If you look at any of them, not many of them stayed true to exactly what they were doing when they started. And it makes sense. When these bands started, these guys were young. They were just learning how to play their instruments.
Angst coming out of that.
Yeah, they're basically making art, and then they figure out, I can actually apply some technique to what I'm doing. So it grows.
They've been touring
along the way.
for a year, and all of a sudden they've got some skills that they didn't have before.
Yeah, I mean, every band. I think every band is like that. There are very few bands who can maintain. You can probably count them on one hand, the bands that maintain their sound and integrity throughout their whole discography. But most bands kind of grow and morph. But I think especially this band and a lot of the hardcore bands, they really did evolve over years. And then a lot of them kind of go back. At some point they grow and then they come back to where they
miss
started.
the old days where the songs were pretty simple.
Exactly. That song did not make it to the first album with Joe Wood. The name of the first album with him is called Change Today. The cover has a very awesome picture of these ladies' hands over some tarot cards. Very cool. And
was it the same lady you saw?
It was not Axl.
Okay.
No, it was not Axl. But there is an Axl connection coming. Okay. So you just wait. Let's see. I got the TSOL album, I'm trying to put it into perspective of when I actually got the album. So I had the skate rock tape for a while, and back in those days, man, if you could have 3 or 4 tapes, that's kind of all you could afford, and then you traded with your friends. You would dub them on.
That's like 2 hours of music.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a lot
you just
of
listen to it over and over. So I don't actually remember when I got Change Today. I'll have to put some thought into that. But I wanted to play the second song off of Change Today called Just Like Me. And again, this album was made on a shoestring budget, I think in 4 days, on a budget that was actually the dead Kennedys. They loaned them the money. And the material really, again, it branches out into more of a goth, a very different direction for them than where they were going previously. So this is the second cut off of Change Today. This is called Just Like Me from 1984.
Are you sure you weren't playing bass on that track? Because it kind of reminded me of some of your licks there.
Oh, shit. I've been found out.
Yeah. Did you go back and dub over your own bass line over that?
There was a reason I played that song, because every time I hear it, I go, damn, I sound just like that. That's exactly the style of bass that I play.
Yeah.
He even played a Rickenbacker, which is what I play. So.
The sound was similar. The content was similar. It's a good thing. A high compliment. Very high compliment.
It shows, I mean, because you know me so well, it shows how much this band meant to me at such a young age and how much it just soaked in.
It's really funny to hear that now after all these years. I hear where it began. I mean, you can pinpoint this one song right here, that bass line.
Third tape I ever.
I mean, you play guitar too, but as far as your bass playing goes, that was it. That was the spark right there.
In this album, the bass is very much out front. Mm-hmm. And Mike Roach, I mean, the guy, I've never heard anybody really give him credit for being such an amazing bass player, and he is. I mean, he inspired me tremendously, and he's probably the reason that I eventually gravitated towards bass. So every time I listen to music, so just so everybody knows, I've played drums. I played drums when I was in high school in bands, and the reason I did that was because I was one of the only drummers in our little town, so I was like, I can play in any group I want if I get a set of drums.
That's the way to think. Demand,
and so that's
supply,
what I did.
demand.
And I love playing drums. And then when I went to college, I couldn't take my kit with me, so I bought a guitar and I started writing songs. And I realized that, I really like playing guitar because I can write songs and I can kind of control the band. And so
that never worked for me. I didn't realize that was part of the job, that you could control the band.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I
should have taken advantage of that.
I put together several bands in college, and I kind of, was the glue that kind of held them together. And I did that because I was playing guitar and writing the songs. But anyway, I realized after several years that when I listen to music, I always listen to the bass. If I'm going to hum a song, it's usually the bass line. And I did it without really thinking about it. And so one day it just hit me when we were playing. I'm like, I should just play bass.
Yeah.
I've always loved the bass. Why don't I just play bass? And my first instrument I ever owned was actually a bass guitar. But I let my friend Connor play it, and I bought drums. So basically, I had a bass guitar for like a year. I didn't really learn how to play it, and I gave it to Connor, and he was amazing. So I said, I'm going to move to drums.
Yeah, I'll acquiesce to him.
But
I heard more of the Gothic lineage in that song. I mean, maybe it was just my imagination, but it was definitely more of a avant-garde horror movie soundtrack type song that I could picture this being played over, just flashing lights and a scene in a fun house or something like that that's going horribly wrong.
Your ability to transition is just amazing. And you don't even know it.
Mr. Segway. Your
segue is great. So the next, I realized as I was listening to that what the timeline was for me for getting the tape for T.S.O.L. So I had the Thrasher skate rock tape for a long time before I actually got the Change Today. So we're talking probably 1986. This album actually came out in 84. And I got the skateboard tape, the skate rock tape, probably in 85, 86-ish. In 1985, there was a B movie that came out, a horror movie that got me really into horror movies at the same time. So in the 80s, you had all your slasher flicks. But what I really gravitated towards was zombie flicks. And Return of the Living Dead came out in 1985, I believe it was. Maybe 86. I didn't see it until 86 because it was on HBO when I saw it. I saw it Halloween night, 1986.
You were still ahead of the time, though, because it was all the rage the past 10 years, so that was even before.
This was, the Romero flicks
Walking
were out.
Dead and all of that.
Yeah, no, this is long before that. But Return of the Living Dead was some of the guys that were involved with the original Night of the Living Dead. It wasn't George Romero, but it was some other guys. Anyway, they put out Return of the Living Dead, and the theme for Return of the Living Dead was punk rock. The bad guys in the movie are kind of the kids or these punk rockers.
Was that the one in the mall?
No.
Okay, you took me to see that one.
Oh, yeah. That was Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead, okay.
Yeah, that was a Romero flick.
A lot of dead people, that's all I remember.
That one came out, the original came out in the 70s, and then they remade it in the 2000s.
Okay.
That's the one we saw. Return of the Living Dead came out in 85, I believe. And like I said, I saw it in 86, and so it featured much faster zombies. Before that, all the zombies were always just
really
slowly walking. These were like super fast zombies, and it was kind of humorous. It was real kitschy, campy. Great film. If you haven't seen the original Return of the Living Dead, go check it out. But it's got a great punk rock soundtrack. And it had TSOL on it. And I remember Halloween night, Connor Tyndall and I were having to spend the night at my house. We went out and did the whole Halloween thing, and then we came in and watched Return of the Living Dead on HBO. I remember it to this day like it was yesterday. And the music in it was awesome. The movie itself was awesome to a 12, 13-year-old, whatever I was then. I remember hearing that voice, that Joe Wood voice. I'm like, oh, that's a TSOL song that I've never heard before. Of course, I only had 2 TSOL songs, so I didn't really know any better.
A huge catalog.
Yeah, so I didn't know. I was in a little tiny town in South Carolina. TSOL was not really on the shelves. I had to search for it. But anyway, there was a song featured in that film, and I didn't know what it was called, and I didn't know back then that you could wait until the credits and read what the songs were. I'm a kid. I don't know any better. So anyway, I go, I'm going to go find that song. It's an awesome song. Only heard it once, so I couldn't remember exactly what it was. But what I did do is I went out and I bought Change Today. I went to Charlotte because we lived about an hour from Charlotte. We went up to Charlotte one day, and I found the TSOL tape for Change Today, the Joe Wood album. And so I listened to it, and I thought, oh, this has to be the song from Return of the Living Dead. It's got to be because it's creepy and it's super cool. So this is a song called It's Gray from Change Today, and I thought this was the song that was in the movie. It's not.
It's not.
But this is a really great,
really
creepy,
close
gothy. This should have been in a movie. So this is It's Gray from Change Today. I love this album. It's to me, it's one of the most perfect albums I own. So here's a third song from Change Today. This is It's Gray, TSOL, 1984.
She lives in Shadow Park, miles from where I dwell. She's an angel of the dark, born and raised in hell. Reckon his feelings, poems for the dead. Mounting passion, senses reeling. Love is nothing but carnival stealing. You'll see.
The opening to that was very spooky. I'm glad we had the lights on.
You can see why at that age I thought that has to be the song that I heard in,
Yeah, I mean,
in the
that
horror movie.
lends itself perfectly to something like that. I'm surprised they haven't been featuring more than that one.
So the song that actually was featured in the horror movie, The Return of the Living Dead, was a song called Nothin For You. Nothin For You, if I can say that better. And the album that it came off of came after the Return of the Living Dead. It was called Revenge. And this is where they kind of crafted that goth image a little bit more, but they got a little poppier with it, a little more sheen to it. They were still on Enigma. They weren't on a major label, but they were starting to move a little more towards what was happening in Southern California at the time, which was kind of the rise of the hair bands. Mm-hmm. And so they had a little more hard rock, a little less punk, still goth. So they were kind of in that dark glam. It's kind of
dark glam.
It's an interesting sound. So check out Revenge. It's a really good album. I'm going to have to play Nothin For You because, again, it was such an impact on me, but the whole album's really good. I would say it's a very underrated album. I think Enigma at the time thought this was going to be their breakout. They thought this was going to be a huge album, but it didn't happen for them. But what it did do for them is it put them on the road with a lot of the contemporary Sunset Strip bands. So they're out and about hanging out with Guns N' Roses, an early incarnation of Guns N' Roses and those types of bands. So they're starting to get mixed in with that sort of scene. And they're starting to move away from the punk scene that they helped kind of sculpt. So it's a weird transition that they're making, but a lot of those groups were sort of doing the same thing.
Was their hair making the transition?
Their hair was making the transition. If you look at the cover for Revenge is a group shot. And you can see that they're starting to
a little bit
get
of a
the longer
perm.
hair. They're starting to dress a little bit differently.
Yeah.
It's not quite glam. It's not punk, though. It's somewhere in between. It's goth glam is what I'm going to call it. Dark glam.
I like that. I like dark glam.
Yeah, let's call it dark glam. We're going to create a new genre today. So I want to play Nothin For You. It's off the Return of the Living Dead soundtrack. I think this is a different mix on the final version of the Revenge album. This is off of the Revenge album. TSOL. Nothin For You, 1986.
I got nothing for you, or you can look under my rug. I got no smack for you. You're in trance from that drug. I got no tears for you. I got nothing to worry about. I got no fear for you. No, no, no. My guns are just a layup out. My body is aching inside out, my nose is always cold. Am I still 24, or am I starting to grow? Am I growing old? Suicide is just a state of mind. Not for me, I got places to hide a day to day. Nights awake, yeah, stealing is my way of life. I got to pay my bills today. Will I leave my knife?
They discovered the reverb button for their vocals on that particular song.
80s.
They didn't sell out. I mean, that wasn't a complete acquiesce to the sound at the time. They still had the funk sound to the rhythm tracks and things like that, but a few little minor changes that brought it a little bit more modern, in my opinion. But it still sounded like them. It wasn't a drastic change into the glam world, even though they were hanging out with those guys.
Yeah, there's a couple things in that song and on that album that really date it to 1986 to me, and it's the drum sounds for one.
Yeah.
That heavily gated, where it's like, it's basically you have no, it just gets to a level and then it just cuts. So it's a noise gate, and that was a very 80s thing to do. I think we can blame Prince for that.
He's not here to defend himself, so be careful.
Well, he started it. It's his fault. But then they took it way too far, and it doesn't. To me, it never worked that great with hard rock music. But it was all over. It was all over the 80s.
Yeah.
But it did make it sound very different from 70s rock. So I guess it had its point. But anyway, you can tell that's there. And then I don't know if you noticed, but in the last song, where they were really stretching that goth vibe, they used a lot of chorus effect on the guitars. So which was again such an 80s thing. But you notice in here that's gone in this song, and then they add in a more traditional guitar lead, which you didn't hear in the other songs. And all the other songs are very punk rock chordy.
Yeah, there was no real note for note lead in the earlier stuff. You don't hear that in punk rock a lot.
Yeah,
and you could tell this was one of the things that they said, okay, let's make one little change here.
You can tell Joe's like, I want to play some leads.
An actual lead, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to play some blues-based leads. So you can hear them starting to infuse a little more of that blues into what they're doing. It still has kind of a goth vibe to it. So again, I think it's dark glam. But check out Revenge, it's cool. What happens next is, if you just go Google the cover of TSOL Hit and Run, you can tell by the cover what happened next. And what happened was they fully embraced glam metal. They are as Hollywood can be. Just go look at the cover. Joe Wood's hair is just sticking straight out. I mean, it looks cool.
Cool, quotation
for
marks.
For that time.
Cool with quotation marks.
But if you think about where they came from in just a few short years to get to that, I can see where the fan base was like, what the hell?
What is going on here?
Because at that time, it wasn't as open of an environment where you can do whatever you want. It was either you were this or that. Yeah. And if you liked punk, you were into punk. If you liked metal, that's what you were into. And it was around this time that the crossover was starting to happen, but they called that thrash, and that's not what they were playing.
No.
Because
there was no fusion at the time.
Yeah. It wasn't anything goes. It was, very much a structured, you either like this or that. And they were trying to do everything. So they totally get into the glam metal scene. They record an album called Hit and Run. It's their last album on Enigma for a little bit, and released this in 87. And they go on tour, and their opening band is a band called Guns N' Roses.
Never heard of them.
Yeah.
They must not have done well.
But within a few weeks, Guns N' Roses' album called Appetite for Destruction comes out, and the tables flip. And TSOL is then opening from there on out for Guns N' Roses. So they do a tour with Guns N' Roses where they're playing shows with them, and this is right at the time that Appetite comes out. They are also touring with a little band at that time called Red Hot Chili Peppers. So they're getting great exposure to two of the world's
hottest
soon-to-be
bands.
biggest bands ever. But yet, here we are on InObscuria talking about TSOL, unfortunately. One of my favorite bands, but it just didn't happen for them. Now, what's really interesting, if you go back to 87, you think about 87, 88 time frame, what Guns N' Roses songs were big. What would you say their biggest song was off of Appetite, if you had to say?
Oh,
the biggest single off of that album. I mean, the whole album was huge.
Yeah. But. I mean, most radio airplay with Sweet Child.
Okay. Sweet Child of Mine. And do you happen to remember, you probably don't, but the shirt the drummer's wearing in the whole video, if you go and look at it.
I don't remember that. That was 1988.
It is this shirt that I'm wearing today.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So he was wearing, in the Sweet Child of Mine video, he is wearing a TSOL, True Sounds of Liberty, black t-shirt with white lettering. Clear as day, it says TSOL. And I remember when that video came out, and I just thought it was like, oh my God, he's wearing a TSOL shirt. That's so cool. Because I didn't think of them in the same
it seemed like two completely different worlds.
TSOL was a punk band to me. I didn't think of them. I didn't get Hit and Run when it came out. I was I was still into the older stuff. I wasn't able to buy everything that was new that was coming out. But I do remember that video and seeing that going, okay, these guys have and I didn't know Guns N' Roses that well when I saw the video, and I was like, okay, these guys have a new cred for me. They're wearing a TSOL shirt, so that's really cool. So that actually did well for TSOL. The fact that he's wearing that shirt in that video sold units.
Seriously?
Yeah. So it got increased in attention. Hit and Run is the best-selling album they ever had. Although the sound of it, I would say, is as far removed from anything they had done at that point in time, even though everything they've done is kind of
Now, I can't remember.
changed.
Did they do any of those songs from Hit and Run at the show that we saw?
No, we're going to get there.
Okay.
So we'll get there, okay?
Right.
Let's come back to that. So again, this is the Joe Wood era of the
Right.
band. This is a completely different TSOL. It only has Ron Emery and Mike Roche.
Okay.
So the guitarist and the bass player. So anyway, I'm going to play a song from Hit and Run, and I was trying to pick one that was like the most glammy, what you would say is, oh yeah, that's Sunset Strip music from 1987. So this is a song called The Name is Love. And for me, when I go back and I listen to this album and the one that comes after it, Joe completely abandoned the part of his voice that I love, which is that deep baritone. And instead he goes for that screamy higher register. And he totally ruined his version of TSOL for me. These two albums I can listen to, but without that voice being that booming baritone, it just doesn't sound as good to me. And if he would have kept that, I probably would have liked these two albums a lot better. But here we go. This is The Name of Love off of Hit and Run from 1987.
I got 1,000 faces. I'm around the world. I'm in all the right places for my church to unfurl. And I'm the king of all unseen. And I'm the king of all the magical things. The name is love. I'm as wicked as an animal dance. The name is love. And I'll get you like a vampire train. I got a million methods I get around. I'm gonna build you up, then I'll take you down. And I'm the king of all unseen. And I'm the king of all the magical things. The name is love. I'm as wicked as an animal dance. The name is love. Are you willing to take a chance? The name is. The name is. The name is. I've been around forever. Mercy, I have none. I've been around forever. I've broken hearts I've won. And I'm the king of all unseen. And I'm the king of all the magical things. My name is love. I'm as wicked as an animal dance. My name is love. I'm gonna get you like a vampire train. My name is love. My name is love.
he was trying a little too hard to be Stephen Pearcy. I guess when you're hanging out with all those guys and they're all sounding like they did, it's just natural to go, hey, yeah, I want to do that too, because they're making tons of money and having huge shows. And, you know, I might have done the same thing myself if I could have done that. But
you can just tell they're not being true to them. I mean, you can hear to me, you can even hear it in the bass playing. Like Mike, you can tell he's not really.
It's just like a caricature of a bad hair band. Like, let's go pretend that we're a hair band for this album, and they're just pretending.
Yeah, I think it sounds to me like Joe was into it. He was, he's the one primarily writing these songs at this point in time. Ron had kind of stopped writing some of these songs, but I can just hear the other thing that's going on, and you can. I don't know if you can hear it, but I know the story. The other thing that's going on is these guys are getting really heavy into drugs, really heavy, and you can just kind of hear the sloppiness. To me, and they're playing from where they had this gusto and this passion for what they were playing before that they recorded in 4 days. Here, I bet they took longer to record, even though they still didn't have a big budget.
And it probably sounded amazing to them. Like, this is the best thing.
It comes across flat to me. I'm not a huge fan of this album. There's some good songs on it, but again, I think as a band not being true to who they were, they should have stayed on the trajectory that they were on. But that's not what this band did. They were always changing every single album. So what happens after this is, even though it's their highest charting album, Enigma doesn't really know what to do with them because it's not there weren't these types of bands on Enigma. Mm-hmm. So Enigma drops them, and they go and they play some showcases. They go to New York to try to get signed to a major because they've been playing with some big bands and they're getting some press, mainly from Guns N' Roses. And they're just too drugged out and too drunk, and they just can't get their shit together, and nobody signs them. But they find a way to put out a live album. They go back to the clubs, and they find a way to put out a live album next on Restless Records. And so I'm going to play a song from that album. It's an interesting listen because they play only the material that Joe has played with them, so nothing from their early punk days. But they play all the stuff from Change Today up until this point in time, which is Hit and Run. And even though it's a span of only 3 albums, you can just hear how different it is. And when you put it all together, it's a really weird collection of songs because you've got these gothy songs, then you got these real hair metal-y sounding songs. And in the covers they put in here, they do All Along the Watchtower, which every band ever to play a bar has played.
Guilty.
Me too. And they play Roadhouse Blues. Now, Roadhouse Blues, with his voice actually covering a Doors song, is amazing. And I was going to put that on here, but it's like 7 minutes long, so I'm not going to put that on everybody.
We'll listen to that tonight.
It's a hard album to find. If you can find it, you're only going to find it used. But it's TSOL Live from 1988. I couldn't find any kind of stats on how it did. I can only assume it didn't do that well. But it was cool when I found it. I didn't find it until probably 10 years ago. Rare. But this is a song called No Time from TSOL Live 1988. This is them playing in a club, and you can tell it sounds like a club in Southern California.
Don't look down and cry. day. Really try. Can you see my country die today? But if you did, you break down and cry. Tomorrow, too late, and I'll tell you I can't wait. There is no time. There is no time. Tomorrow's too late, and I'll tell you I can't wait. There is no time. There is no time. It's too late, and I'll tell you I can't wait. There is no time. There is no time. Tomorrow's too late, and I'll tell you we can't wait. There is no time. There is no time. There is no time. There is no time.
That live track was pretty awesome. That had a lot more energy to it. The guitars were heavier. It was a better blend of punk and metal along the lines of Motorhead, where it was just straightforward from the start to the finish, just punch you in the face all the way through the song. And I really liked that song. The one you played before, I was just rolling my eyes at.
I totally agree with you. And that live album, like I said, it's odd because of the mix of songs, but they're playing on the live album like a band who's hungry. So I think they were
Maybe they cleaned up a little bit or something.
I don't know if they're cleaned up, but they had been dropped from Enigma. They're looking for a bigger piece of the pie, and you can tell they're kind of going for it.
They're concentrating, at least this time, on the music instead of just the effect of the sound.
Now, something that's cool that I was reading a magazine that I bought it was a magazine that somebody put together with Paul Stanley from Kiss's solo tour. In 1989, Kiss was taking a break, and Paul Stanley went out on a solo tour, and that's where he first took out Eric Singer as a drummer, who's now the drummer in Kiss. But anyway, on this solo tour, he had various opening acts, and I was looking through the book, and it's a really detailed dive into all the places that he played, and I saw an ad for someplace on the West Coast, and TSOL 89, so it was right around this time from what we just heard, are the opening band at a club that Paul Stanley's the main act. And I was just thinking, man,
That's
at that point in time, if I could have seen that, though,
that would have been the Holy Grail.
I mean, that would have been the Holy Grail for me to see that show. But I'd only found that like a year or two ago. I had no idea that TSOL ever opened for Paul Stanley.
So you didn't become a man for another couple of years after that.
Right. We go from 1988, where they're doing the whole live thing. They're trying to get signed to a major. It kind of falls through for them. And they go back to Enigma for one last try. And before they start recording, actually, I guess when they're finishing up the tour, Ron Emery says, "I've had enough." So the original guitarist is out. He's like, "I've had enough. I'm not into this, where we're headed." And so now you only have the bass player, Mike Roach, from the original TSOL. Everybody else are different members, you know. And they go and they record an album called Strange Love. And this is as far as it can possibly get from where they started.
Southern California, across the coast.
However, it is, if you listen to the album and don't think about who the band is, it's not a bad album. But when you know the history and you're a fan of this band and you listen to it, it's just so far removed from where they were. They just went too far. And I'm going to play a track from Strange Love called Blow by Blow. And the reason I want to play this is there's two reasons. One, this band at this point in time, we're doing a whole lot of blow. And the second is, after this album came out, actually before the album came out, Mike leaves, which means you have no original members of TSOL in the band any longer.
No T.S.O.L.
Exactly. So Mike and Ron, I guess, had written the name over to Joe. So Joe owns the TSOL name. He's not an original member. Again, his brother-in-law was the original singer.
Sign the title over. It's all yours.
But basically it's his. And so what happens is they come to blows after this album to try to get the name back because they want to be a punk rock band and call themselves TSOL. He wants to continue on this path and call it TSOL. So it's an interesting thing that happens after this album comes out. But before we talk about that, let's play the song. This is Blow by Blow off of Strange Love. This is TSOL in 1990.
Did Blackie Lawless replace the singer on this song?
Right? Totally different voice.
Totally different everything. I mean, there was nothing left of the original band, member-wise, sound-wise, passion, anything. That was all just pure hair metal, straight off.
Totally agree. And like I said, so after this album comes out, they tour, and while they're touring this version of the band, the original group gets back together, the original four. And so originally, they call themselves the original TSOL. And so the original TSOL releases a live album playing all the old punk rock songs off the first 3 albums before Joe Wood got involved. They released that in 1991. And then in 1992, Enigma releases a greatest hits album.
K.T.O.L, greatest hits.
Exactly, a greatest hits album of TSOL, which is hilarious because they never had a hit in their life.
Greatest almost hits of TSL.
And the greatest hits are nothing but the Joe Wood era, and it's mostly the last two albums, which had only been a couple of years ago. So it's mostly Hit and Run and Strangelove material. Very bizarre. I don't even know why Enigma would release that. They couldn't have sold anything.
They're trying.
But, well, and then they didn't try too hard because they dropped them after that. So it's very bizarre. So Joe Wood and Mitch Dean, who Joe, again, was the lead singer, guitarist, brother-in-law to Jack Grissom, and Mitch Dean being the drummer who replaced the original drummer. So those two guys have been in the band now since 1984, or 83, actually. And they own the name. And so these two factions battle over this name for the rest of the decade, basically. And in the meantime, like the original group, a couple of those guys go to prison for a few years.
Oh, take a little break.
Yeah, some rough times, a lot of drugs. But they start to clean up, and right as they do, Slayer in the 90s released a covers album. And they cover two of the TSOL songs, the original group, the hardcore songs. And it gets the ball rolling again. And so I guess it gets enough momentum that Jack's able to get the name back from Joe.
They got a little money to pay for lawyers. That's what it was.
Exactly, probably. And so in 1999, after battling with Joe Wood for this name, they get it back, and they go on the Warped Tour as TSOL, the original TSOL, and they've been TSOL, the original band, ever since.
That's what we saw.
And that's the band that we saw. We saw the original group.
Yeah, because I was going to say, if I asked that question, I didn't hear these later songs before I asked that. I definitely would have known the answer because they didn't play anything close to that.
Yep. And they've released 4 fantastic albums since 2001. I mean, true to their original selves. They never veered again from the original material. I mean, it's old school punk rock, but they have the keyboards in it, so they have that whole. I would say they're the closest thing to an American version of the Damned that there is, and I love that version of TSOL as well. Maybe at some other point we'll go through that version of TSOL, but I wanted to resurrect Joe Wood because I have a real soft spot for those first.
That's where
it
hit for you, so that's the special.
That
part.
was my original. That was my introduction to this band, and really, to be honest, it's the guitar playing and the bass guitar work that, along with Joe's voice, that really, just got me. And to this day, like you said, that bass playing off of Change Today, that's what I play to this day. That's the type of bass that I play.
Go back and isolate your bass lines from our series.
So, I mean, it had that much of an impact on me to this day. I'm almost 50 years old, and here I am still referencing this thing that I heard. This thing that I heard in 1986. I have lots of other bass players that I like out there, but I would say this is really close to my style. So anyway, I have an affinity for Joe Wood's music and his voice and what he brought to the band and the direction that he put them in. Not so much the later years, although some of those albums aren't horrible. It's just they're so far removed from the first two. Right,
but once again, the live album being a little bit of an exception, where
because it's a bridge.
Yeah, it's a bridge between the good and the bad.
Yeah. So I would say that was my last song for this episode. I would say go search out Change Today. In my opinion, it's one of the more perfect albums, if I could say there's a perfect album. For me, it's Change Today, TSOL from 1984. Revenge, really good album.
Any updates to what he's up to since he hasn't had the name for 20 years?
I did look him up, and I do. He released a couple of blues albums. He went back to the blues after this. He went and did what he originally was meant to do, which is play the blues. And his blues albums are very, very true to the blues. Like it's not rock based blues. It is blues.
Delta blues.
It's true Chicago Delta blues style. But they're really good though. And it's got a little bit of that grit, that Southern California kind of white boy blues grit to it, which is cool. It seems like that's true to who he really is. So go look at that. If you can find it on iTunes pretty easily. It's Joe Wood and the Lonely Ones. And they have 2 albums out. I think there might be a 3rd album. I haven't heard it. And then he also, I'm not sure if he still does it, but he used to, when he needed a little bump in money, he would go perform in Brazil as TSOL. He would put together a band and perform as TSOL because Brazil only knew that version of TSOL. I guess those records were released there. And so up until a few years ago, he would go and play festivals. So he
As
played
TSOL.
huge festivals as TSOL to get a little scratch.
They don't have an extradition agreement with the United States.
Yeah. So he could do that, I guess, in Brazil.
Legal loophole, yeah.
But that's what he's up to. I think these days he's just doing clubs in California. He's still doing it, playing the blues. So if you're ever in California and you see Joe Woods playing, go check it out. He still plays some of the old TSOL songs, I think more blues style, but
No, that would
be cool.
Yeah.
So that's all I have, man. What do you think?
Learned a lot. I want to listen to that live album again.
Yeah, you should check that out for sure. So we'll try to go down the path of the original band maybe at some other point. But that's all we have for this week. We'll see you next time.
See ya.